Hi everyone, I am Jeff Lawton. I'm going to look at a game from the chess24 Banter Blitz Cup. This was in the quarterfinals and it's between Georg Meier White and Alireza Firouzja, 16-year-old who's ranked, well, George was is 182nd in the world and Firouzja already at 16 years old is 21st. This is on the classical ratings list. And at the time of the game, this was the 10th game, and Firouzja was leading 6.5, 2.5. It has to be said that he didn't really sort of chess-wise, he wasn't doing a huge amount. So he was being well and truly outplayed, but he kept ahead on the clock, and this was to his advantage. You know, he was constantly sort of winning in that department, and that was why he had the big score. So in the game, Meier opened knight f3, d5. G3, and we had knight f6, bishop to g2, and we had c5, castles for white, e6, b3, sort of double fianchetto, and knight c6, bishop to b2, bishop d6, and d4, sort of opening the centre. And white's got to do something in the centre. And the alternative is to play something like c4 and attack the centre that way. So we had cd4, knight d4, castles for black, and now c4. And now Firouzja played at e5, and knight c6, b takes c6, cd5. And it was while, a move or two back, Firouzja realised that his e5 was a mistake, and because his initial thought was that he was going to play here, but then he hoping for bishop d5, and then he gets the two bishops for the pawn. But he realised here that he couldn't believe what he'd done. That white could just go knight c3, simply winning a pawn, because you can't advance it because the rook is on pre down here. So he couldn't believe he had his sort of head in his hands. He couldn't believe what he'd done. So he played knight d5, which is not at all a move you want to make, because white now gets a much better pawn structure. Knight d2, rook e8. So Alireza at this point on his stream, he was saying he was completely busted. He was fed up with the position he'd got. Well, yet again in yet another game, he was struggling out the opening, and he just said, "I'm going to have to flag him." This was on. This is only on move 12. He's already saying, "I'm going to have to flag him." So we had rook c1, and bishop b7. Knight c4, so the knight's now on a strong square. It can't be attacked by a pawn. Bishop to c7, queen d2, and now queen e7. Knight a5, gaining the bishop pair due to the attacks on the bishop and the pawn. Bishop takes a5, queen takes a5, and now e4. And then we had rook f to d1. h5, so black's counterplay. He's hoping to do something on the king's side and push the h-pawn forward. I mean, he's got something in the position. The knight's on a strong square, but the bishop is particularly bad, although it does do a good job of defending the pawn here on c6. So we had queen c5, queen to g5, and here Meier thought for about 20 seconds or so, I think, and Firouzja sort of calmly, objectively realised he needed to get his bishop back into the game. So that's what he was figuring out, that his plan was to play the bishop round to the king's side and to play h4, and if necessary, he was going to sacrifice this. So he knew what he was going to do, even though the position's against him. And we had queen d4. He put his queen onto g6 to protect this, which was attacked on e4. And we had e3, and now h4. So as he said, he can't play this move straight away, because then rook c6, and the queen is unable to capture that due to mate. So first he played h4, and we had bishop to h3. And now he's part of his plan that he'd figured out before was to jettison the a pawn and go for an attack. queen takes a7 and bishop to c8. We had bishop f1 because white doesn't really want to trade the white squared bishops, because then there's a lot of white squared weaknesses around the king. So now the bishop enters the game. It's doing something over here. Bishop g4, rook d2, and now it's on a great square f3. So Meier brought his queen back to d4 to keep black tied down to the g7 square, and now rook e6. But by this point we can see Meier is down to 20 seconds and Firouzja has still got over a minute, so he's in his element really, Firouzja, in this type of situation. And we had b4, hg3, and then we had fg3. You can't really go h takes because of black can try and double down the h file as long as he keeps his g7 pawn protected. So something like queen here threatening mate, and then bishop g2 to try and stop that, and then we can play rook h6, and rook h1 is happening. So f takes g3 was played, and now queen g5 hitting e3. But Meier's very, very short a time, but even Firouzja was down to about half a minute by now. Then we had rook c5, so he played rook a8. Then we had b5, trying to undermine the protection of the knight. So Firouzja played queen e3, but that took him some time. He was a bit annoyed with himself, but he was using up his remaining time at this point. Queen e3, knight e3, and bc6, and now knight takes f1. King takes f1, but now the black pawn is very dangerous, and we had rook c2, and now Firouzja spotted the winning continuation. Rook to d8, rook c1, and now he played rook d1 check, forcing rook d1 and e2, which wins the rook and gets a new queen and wins the game. After something like this, then we just get a queen, and white isn't in time to get his own queen. So there we are. So that was that took Alireza on to 7.5, 2.5, and then he also won the 11th game with white. Again, I don't think he stood too well in that game, but he found a way to win it, and he's now through to the semi-final. And then if he wins the semi-final, he'll, as long as Magnus wins his semi-final. Well, actually, I know he did win the semi-final because that was yesterday against Sugirov. So, and I think Firouzja's playing his semi-final later today against Indian Ravian. So yeah, all to play for today. So I hope you enjoyed the game and give some insight into Firouzja's 3-minute methods. And thanks for watching. Bye now.